Welcome back to our growing experiment. We're here with Kara from Red Rowan Acres. Kara, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so my name's Kara. Red Rowan Acres was named after my daughter Ren. So I'm a mother of one little girl. I'm married. I also work full time from home and have a ton of dogs and other animals and a ton of chickens. So my business is pretty much about chickens and breeding chickens and chicken health and knowledge. And I have some of my friends with me today, so hopefully they're well behaved. No promises, as this one's climbing on me.
Okay, so I guess what you do a lot of is like chicken breeding, because you got a whole bunch of different kinds of chickens I've definitely never seen before or ever heard of. I always picture sort of the classic sort of old McDonald had a farm kind of chicken, right? So like how did you get into that? What made you aware of these other breeds, or yeah, how'd you get into that?
So we bought our property in 2017, and we had been looking for about 2 years before we ended up here for somewhere with acreage to start a hobby farm. And I always grew up wanting horses. So I was looking for somewhere that I could potentially we could grow into as a family, and that I could potentially one day get horses. So that's how we ended up here, and we wanted to get other animals too. So we started with chickens as an intro kind of livestock animal, thinking that this is kind of what everyone has and they would be the easiest animal to get into, which I would say they're not. But anyways, we could definitely touch on that. So I started off with a mixed flock of birds that I got from different sources like Kijiji. And then from there, and just doing research about how to care for them and about them, started seeing that there's all these different breeds and they're all so beautiful and there's all these different colors. And it just kind of escalated from there, which I think is a natural progression for a lot of chicken people. So chicken math creeps up on you, and then you end up with a bunch of different chickens and way too many.
How many chickens do you have?
So right now, I believe we're at just under 100, okay, which is kind of where we like to hover. Because anything over 100, then you start getting into other regulations. So I try and just hover under that mark. I think I have 73 laying hens right now.
Okay. And so I guess you probably have a mix of different kinds in the sense that like you got some that are for laying and some that are probably for meat as well, or?
So I don't have any strictly meat birds right now. I do have some breeds that are dual purpose. So they are laying breeds, but can also be used for consumption. So some of those would be like the Orpingtons, Black Cormorants, and Wyandottes. And then I have some that are just strictly layer breeds. And then I have some that are just ornamental breeds. So basically they don't lay a lot of eggs or serve much of a purpose when it comes to food consumption, but they look very, very nice and they're very fun.
Well, that's kind of cool. I mean, it's part of it too, where it's like any kind of farm, really. You're going to have some animals that are basically pets, right? Doesn't all have to be about making food or whatever else. Mm-hmm. So, and in all the different breeds there must be like, is there different qualities to like, say, the eggs for what they're laying, or?
So each breed lays different color eggs, different size eggs, and different amount of eggs per year. And then also the benefit with some of the layer breeds is feed consumption versus the amount of eggs that you get as well, which a lot of people, when they're looking for production purposes, that's kind of a focus. So there is different, like some of ours lay blue, white, brown, dark brown. Some of them lay very small eggs. We actually have modern game bantams, and they're just really, really tiny miniature chickens with very, very tall eggs. And They're hilarious. They look like a cartoon, doesn't look real at all, but they lay miniature little white eggs. So
Okay. Yeah, it's like it's one of those things where when I first started looking at your page, it was like I guess because I never really thought about it before, but there's so many different sort of shapes and stuff you get a chicken in, and then I guess yeah, it does follow you would have all the different kinds of eggs and stuff.
So what is it that you do with your eggs? Oh, sorry.
I hatch them. I
Okay.
feel like I'm at a point where I don't even eat eggs anymore. Honestly, I'm like I have no appeal for it anymore. So mostly I'm hatching them and selling hatching eggs.
Okay.
When I did eat eggs, like based on the chicken, I don't feel like there's any difference in taste. And the taste is very much based on their diet. So there's a big difference in between like farm fresh eggs versus store bought based on diet, based on being able to free range and have access to eat bugs and grass and all those types of things. And you can really see that in the difference in your eggs when you crack them. So store-bought yolk is very yellow, where a chicken that has a very rich, high nutrients diet, the yolks are almost orange, like they're very dark. So the taste is based on diet and same with the coloring. But for all my eggs, I don't even eat them anymore. I actually bought eggs from the store for my grandma the other week. So I was like, oh my God, as if I'm doing this. But it's solely because I hatch and sell all of my eggs pretty much.
Yeah. So was that sort of a choice that you made because it was just where your business kind of naturally took you, or did you ever have any intention of selling the eggs, or like, yeah?
So when I started with my mixed flock, I actually used to sell the eggs as eating eggs from farm stand to like coworkers or neighbors or things like that. So that's where I started. But then when I started hatching and kind of getting into that side of the business, that's when I kind of stopped selling them as eating eggs, just because the same egg that's $5 a dozen as an eating egg could be $40 or more as a dozen as a hatching egg. So it just doesn't make sense to sell them as eating eggs unless there's a surplus where it would be wasted. And even then, to discount it as a hatching egg is still more profitable. And I kind of started going that route because once I started hatching chicks and getting into all that, it's just awesome. I love it. It's wonderful bringing life into the world and seeing them and having chicks around and then sending them off to their homes. And I try and keep touch with everyone that I sell to. So I get like pictures all the time of their family with the chicks and with the chickens. And so it's been really good and something that I really enjoyed. And that's why I kind of just got away from doing the eating eggs and just right into hatching and selling chicks.
When you sell the chicks, is it more of a local business or is it spread out to lots of people?
So we do sales in most of Ontario. And then for the hatching eggs, it's all of Canada. So we ship through Canada Post. And so we can ship anywhere in Canada. And then we do deliveries in Ontario because we travel throughout Ontario for other reasons. So we're able to kind of coordinate with people and meet up and drop them off. Or if we know, say we know we're going down to Toronto or Hamilton or somewhere like that, then we'll kind of plan like customers along the way. So we're just like dropping them off as we go. And we kind of have been able to set it up that way. So it's great because it gives us a larger reach of people that we're able to interact with. Unfortunately, because of regulations, there's no shipping outside of Canada. So I couldn't mail eggs to anyone in the States or vice versa, but that's pretty much the area that we cover.
Okay.
Yeah, I imagine there's got to be like a whole lot of regulation and sort of red tape that you got to deal with being in a small business space, especially in sort of a quasi food space. I mean, like the animals you're selling are more for hatching and stuff like that. They're not food specific in that sense. But yeah, so is that something that you notice is common with a lot of people that are sort of doing something similar to what you do?
So, I mean, there is a lot of regulations when you get too large. So you have to kind of stay within a certain window, or then, like I was saying, once you go over the 100 birds, then you kind of get into other areas where you need to have basically all your birds need to be registered through the Chicken Farmers of Ontario. And basically you have to keep a log of chickens coming in and out. And then also you have to keep records of chickens that pass away, potentially have testing done, or if they pass away, send them out, because they want to regulate if there's any diseases once you become too much of a bigger flock. But for most of the backyard breeders at a smaller scale, there isn't as much going on in terms of regulations. But because that, I find there's a lot of disease spread amongst a lot of like backyard breeders and smaller flocks, just because that those regulations aren't there. And then specifically in Canada as well, we don't have the best setup for chickens. So in the States, they have it's an NPIP program. And basically what it is you have to register, and then your birds need to be health tested every 6 months in order to keep this certification. And you need that certification in order to be able to ship eggs. So we don't currently have anything like that here. And poultry vets are actually very far and few in between. And not only is there not many, but specifically in Ontario, a lot of the pricing to have health testing done or to bring these animals to the vet is just unrealistic and very, very high. So for example, I have a bird, my bird Reese, that needed some x-rays done, and I got quoted locally here in Sudbury $420 for one x-ray for her. So for a lot of people, I feel like that's just really not feasible, because I'll be honest with you, she was $6 on Kijiji, and I love her to bits, but I feel like if it's between, you know, feeding your family and getting your chicken an x-ray, then your chicken's probably going to become the food for your family at that point. So it's very unfortunate where in the States and other areas, they have cheap testing and cheap availability, and they also have medication available at their feed stores, PB Mart, where here it's so heavily regulated. There's no access to really anything. So it makes it difficult to kind of keep disease down because of the circumstances that we're under, pretty much.
Yeah, that's interesting that, I mean, there would be that kind of a barrier put in place there. I mean, for trying to take care of the animals, not having the access to cheaper testing, like it's sort of an impediment in a way for having, say, more people having small farms, because you basically need to operate at a certain size to be able to foot the bill to pay for something like that, or not worry about it and just throw the animal out. Like there's kind of that lost middle ground, basically, where, like, what I kind of like about the smaller scale farms and smaller scale animal husbandry is that I feel like there's a lot more care that goes into the animals, right? And it's sort of unfortunate to hear that that's a barrier that kind of stops effective care of these animals.
Yeah, it definitely is. And like I said, it's very unique to Canada, and specifically so Ontario. I know BC has a program where you can do testing, and I think they charge $25 a bird maybe to do the health testing, which is actually great. Because I know for myself, I had 2 birds tested in town, and my bill was like $240 some dollars. So like I said, when you're operating small scale and you're selling birds and you're selling hatching eggs, to kind of fork out that kind of money to do those tests every 6 months, especially when there's no standard, like no one else is doing it. So there becomes no benefit almost of keeping up with that, which is unfortunate, because like I said, in the States, they have regular testing. So when you're buying from a backyard breeder, you know that breeder is clean, or at least you know what they have, because chickens are very susceptible to diseases and very prone to lots of things. So that's how I was saying earlier, I got them as an easy intro kind of animal, and then quickly learned that they're not really as easy as I thought, because they get a lot of things and they take a lot of care to upkeep. And kind of like what you were saying is, I feel like when you try and care for them at a level that's almost in par with like a domestic animal, like a dog, then it just becomes very unfeasible. And the amount of work that's required, it just becomes overwhelming in a sense because we don't necessarily have those resources. So I find for myself, like with my business, it's been a lot of like learning and figuring out what it is I need to care for them properly and all these obstacles that I've run into. Because I honestly, out of a lot of people I know, I feel like I have the worst luck ever. So if something bad is going to happen, it's probably happened to me. And that's a big thing that I try and share on my page is all the terrible stuff that I've run into and how not to do what I did or how to avoid being in situations that I've found myself in over the past couple of years.
Well, and that makes me think now too, like how you said in the beginning too, it's a lot of people think it's an easy animal, and you were saying reiterating that. And I was just thinking about how often I hear about people getting involved in it, and I've never really heard anyone really talk about diseases or a lot of susceptibility to diseases. So like, what's a common disease that say these birds will get, and what's the consequences of that? And I guess on top of that, is it more complex when you have more breeds, or are the diseases you run into generally the same across the species?
So in terms of disease, they're the same amongst the different breeds, but some breeds are obviously weaker than others. So some of the fancier breeds like Silkies or Polish, they seem to be a lot weaker, where if something does come in your flock, those are the first ones that are going to go or not make it through. So to speak. But the biggest issue I think we have is, and it's like I did it myself. So what happens is when people get into chickens, you usually start getting like a couple chickens here, a couple chickens there, and you kind of source from different places and you're bringing in like babies, grown chickens, like you're kind of mix matching stuff together. So that's an issue definitely for biosecurity. But I mean, when you get started, you don't really think about biosecurity in any which way possible. I find a lot of farmers too, they don't necessarily complain about disease and health issues because if the chickens are simply for food and consumption purposes, a lot of these diseases, they may not be fatal, and also they don't impact the eggs or the meat that you consume. So sometimes it's not really a huge concern for people. So one of the biggest ones that we have is mycoplasma, and it's referred to as MG. So there's two of them, MG and MS. I'm not even going to try and say what the G stands for, to be honest with you. But so in BC, where they have cheap testing, and they had a pilot program where they were testing a bunch of chickens, they found that about 80% of backyard flocks actually have MG. So it's very, very, very common. So when I was speaking with my vet here, they said, well, if it's 80% over there where they're testing and doing preventative measures, then it's got to be upwards of that here. So it's extremely common. Now, the issue with this is that it's one of a few that actually passes through the egg to the chicks. So if you have it in your flock, then when you hatch out eggs, a percentage of those chicks could be born with it. So unintentionally, when people have it, they could be hatching chicks and then they sell those chicks to other people, and those chicks already come with the disease. So that's an issue. But the thing with MG is that the mortality rate for it is really low. And essentially what it is it's like a cold. So if you see people posting like, oh, my chicken's sneezing, it has a cold, typically chickens don't get cold, like the common cold. They get chronic respiratory illnesses. And this is the part that I think a lot of people either don't know or don't understand at first, is that if it's a cold and you treat it and it goes away, because it's chronic, the birds become asymptomatic carriers and they actually carry the virus for life. So you could think about it kind of like herpes or a cold sore. So they have it, they may not have symptoms of it, you can't see, but then when they come under times of stress or weather change, then it comes up again. So it's like a never ending cycle of them like continuously getting colds and then spreading it to kind of other flock members. So I would say that's the most common one. That's the one I try and avoid with my flock. I did have my birds tested about a year ago now, and they tested negative. But the other issue with MG is that it can be carried by like wild birds and wild animals too. So I find as a breeder, you kind of get to this point where it's like you want to have your birds like in a safe bubble where they're not going to get anything, but then to an extent that like they still need to be birds and like go outside. So it's like for me at first when I started to, I was like, I'm going to be really strict with biosecurity. I'm like gonna change shoes and wear and like have them in pens and have them away. But then it's like I got to a point where I'm like, I would prefer them free range and just understand that these are the risks and just try and explain to people like what the risks are. So although my birds may have tested negative a year ago, just from going outside, they can get it. So the way that I try and look at this is I'm just going to assume that they have it, or just assume they have everything. And then what steps can I put in place to make sure that that transfer doesn't go on to customers? And I think that's a benefit because most backyard breeders don't, like a lot of them just say their flocks are clean, but you know what I mean? How do you know? So in doing that, there's a couple of things that I do. Like for MG, I dip all my eggs in Tylen, which is an antibiotic solution, and that's preventative to kill any sort of like microorganism like MG before the chicks hatch. So assuming that it works, that they hatch healthy before they go out, and then just super strict biosecurity and cleaning everything and make sure nothing's cross-contaminated. But there's a ton of diseases, and I mean, I could get into all of them. And the big thing right now is the avian flu. I'm not sure if you've seen anything about that, but we haven't had it since,
but never actually, I don't really know anything about it at all.
Yeah, so there was just actually a seminar that I went to on it because I didn't know a lot about it either, other than the fact that it's bad and we're afraid of it. But I went to a seminar on it last week, and I guess we haven't had any cases since 2015, and we had our first case in December in Newfoundland, and the states are starting to get it. What the issue is with it is that it has like a 98% mortality rate, and it is carried by wild birds as well. So they're warning with migration of wild birds coming into Canada now in the spring to keep an eye about it coming to flocks. They were warning about like poultry shows and, you know, free ranging and stuff like that. And then the other thing that was a big concern is I guess there is a vaccine for it, but not for this strain. So currently there's no treatment plan or preventative measures. And from what I understood in the presentation is Europe is really, really, really bad right now, where they can't keep it under control. So I'm hoping that it doesn't become a problem over here, because that would be very terrible for myself, but also for the commercial poultry industry. Like that could really affect meat and egg production for everyone.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then just in general, I mean, you know, we're already looking at potentially having a lot of food shortages. We don't need a disease that could potentially kill off 98% of, say, poultry meat animals or laying animals or whatever, because that's a huge staple in a Canadian diet, right? A lot of people are eating lots of eggs, and they're eating lots of chicken because, you know, it's a good protein source, and generally it's cheaper than, say, your quadruped kind of animals, right? So yeah, that would be something that would be really, really bad, especially if it's already happening in Europe. Because that's
yeah. And
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say one thing I also took away from the presentation. I feel like when I was talking to people after, they didn't pick up on it, is I guess you can't get it from meat, but humans can actually get it from close contact with their chickens, from handling a sick chicken. So they were saying that this is also like a human threat, because there's potential that it can, like, humans can get it and then it can change into a more deadly variant of that and then become like a issue for us. So when I was hearing this, I'm just like, oh my God, I can't do another virus. Like, I can't do another one. Like, we need to prevent this at all costs. But they basically said to watch out for around here, like if you see any like dead wild birds, they had some numbers you can call to get someone to come get them. Like if you see like a group of dead birds outside or anything like that. So maybe I'll share that information with you guys after, because if anyone sees anything to call it in, they'll come test it just to make sure. That way, if we know we have it in our area, we can like lock everything down and try and prevent any losses or any spread.
Yeah, so I guess that would be what you would have to do sort of then, is you would have to sort of like quarantine the birds, I guess then.
Yeah, you would need to not free range, that's for sure. They were actually already warning about free ranging. They would have to be like indoors or somewhere where they wouldn't have access to wild birds. So
Okay.
even like if you have a coop with a run, a fenced in run where you can prevent birds from getting into the run. But then they also said it can be transferred through like rodents. So
Right.
rodents don't carry it, but if they like walk in any sort of feces or anything and then come into the run or into the coop, they can kind of spread it that way. So
Right. So there's a few points of entry basically that you have to be aware of. So it's really limiting the contact with the wild animals that potentially you're going to have around. And then I guess there would be, I mean, if you see it in the area, in theory, if you see that, you sort of change your practice for a short period of time. Hopefully it passes over and you don't get a bad wave of it, I guess.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's something I never ever really thought about. But I mean, yeah, you got to be really careful about sort of how you handle animals. And that's, I guess I think like maybe most people think sort of like, oh yeah, you just get some chickens and off you go. You're having eggs, you're having a good time, right?
Yeah.
Not realizing that there's all these sort of bugaboos sort of around where you gotta really pay attention to what's going on. I mean, it makes sense. We live in a world that's full of all kinds of pathogens and bacteria and viruses, and it's basically, they want to survive, so they figure out what they got to do to survive, and that means attacking birds or whatever. And we got our thing, and it's just another part of the chain, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. I think the worst part though with a lot of these chicken diseases is that, like I said, they become chronic.
Mm-hmm.
So there's like the chronic respiratory, and then there's others where you buy chickens and they're nice and healthy, so they seem, but then they're carriers. So it's not until you like put them with your flock that you start to see like, oh no, like something's going on, that they brought something in. So, and like I said, most of us just get chickens grow, it's down the street, this person, like I did it myself. And and then you end up with all kinds of different things.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a little more complicated. But I guess that's sort of part of what really is the proper thing that should happen when you start getting involved in these type of new fields, is that you start to find out that, there is a lot of depth to a subject that on the surface looks very, very simple. Mm-hmm. And that's actually maybe a point too, where it's like, it's really hard to be an expert on anything, right? You could spend your whole life, say, studying chickens, and you could probably study chickens until you're gray in the hair and probably still not know everything there is you need to know about a chicken, and that's just chickens, never mind other kinds of birds that you're going to have, right? And I mean, the world just seems to change every time you think you got a handle on something. Like you're like, oh, I found this one thing, and then all of a sudden that changes, and now you're like a whole new paradigm. So I mean, it's good in the way where you're never running out of, I guess, things to do, but it's also it sort of shows you the mammoth challenge that you really undertake when you sort of get into something.
Yeah, for sure. And I find the more animals you have, the more things go wrong. Like when I had 10 chickens, it was like, okay, one got sick. So, you had that time to like care for one. And then it's like you multiply that to like say 100, and now it's like, okay, 10 are sick at the same time or injured or something. So, and then it's just, so they get a lot of stuff like parasites, like worms, mites, lice, stuff like that. So treating that, cleaning the coop, sanitizing it for 10 chickens versus like 100 is just, it becomes a day job. And yeah, there's definitely a lot to learn, and I agree. And we want to get into other animals, but I'm just afraid. I want to do like a ton of research before I just like jump in, and especially know about disease, sickness, what can happen, how do I prevent it, what to even look for, so that I know what to do before I kind of get on my next journey. But we were hoping to do pigs next. But I think I still have a lot of ways away to go. Like I said, after doing chickens as my easy like intro animal, I've come to realize that I don't think any of this is easy. I don't know why I thought maybe it was going to be easy, but it's definitely a lot of hard work. And, you know, the highs are highs, but the lows are lows. I'm not sure if you guys have experienced that, but it can be so rewarding. And then at the same time, like some days can be just so heartbreaking. And I know for myself, there's been multiple times where I'm like, okay, I want to give up, sell the house, like I'm done, just because things get so overwhelming. And then, you know, we just keep doing it.
Well, I think that's in a way, like while we were sort of talking about it, I guess I was sort of feeling like, oh wow, like this is pretty heavy. And I always think of it as being a really light thing, and then it made me think of a silver lining to that, is that for a person like you to start learning about it and get really involved in it and invested in it and really put like your blood, sweat, and tears into it, you're probably the perfect kind of person who should be really taking stewardship of these animals. And I mean, when you think about how many animals there are in the world and how much care they need, especially if we're going to be responsible when it comes to agriculture, that's exactly what we need, is people who are doing what you're doing with the same sort of spirit, you know, going into it consciously, knowing sort of what the consequences are of taking custodianship of these animals, and, you know, what it entails and how to make sure that they thrive and are happy, and as well as potentially feeding into having a small scale farm that could feed the community, say. So it's, you need to have a bunch of people who are doing something like that, and they can talk to each other and get feedback and say, this works, this doesn't work. And it's an ongoing study. And so you need a lot of people that are actively participating.
Yeah, for sure. And that's a lot of what I try and do with like my social media pages, is just share my successes, my failures, a lot of education sharing. And then for people who buy from me, it's just continual support. Like if there's a problem, message me and I can help you and I can work through it, because a lot of the stuff I've been through where I had no idea what I was doing. So if others can kind of learn from, you know, my failures, that would be great. I think that's my ideal goal, is to like set someone up, give them chicks for their family, and set them on like a good path of how to care for them properly. But yeah, it's definitely tough.
Well, and the way you're talking about that too, that also makes me think that that's like the best way that you can kind of conduct any kind of business too, where like you care about the customer too. Like it's like, yeah, you're selling them something, but really you care that this customer is going to have a good experience with their animal, that they're going to have a good experience for themselves and for their family. And it's like, it's a much more conscientious sort of way of conducting. And it's I mean, yeah, you are making money at it, but I mean, it's like, you know, it's not really the focus. It's really actually the care of the animals and the making sure that you're passing on to the next generation of those animals even a healthier future.
Yeah, and I want to say, like with the business in terms of making money, I like to call it a self-sustaining hobby, where, you know, money that's made ends up being spent on chickens.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's like, just in terms like, you know, I'm not trying to like profit and get rich here, but it's like the money that I do make, it helps pay for the feed. And then I find I'm always like, anytime I'm making any sort of profit, it's reinvesting it in the setups. So my goal as well is to just have it so it's like run smooth, automate as much stuff as possible, and just improve the quality of the housing. So that's kind of like where a lot of the funds go into, is like upgrading feeders. Or I find a lot of the learning is like, I'll buy something and then realize, or even my setup, I'll build something and then realize this doesn't work. you know, I read it in a book, I saw it online, but realistically, when you get into it, it doesn't work. So with my first coop, for example, I built it big because I thought, oh, I'll start with 10 chickens, but I'll probably want a couple more. And then not realizing that when you get into chickens, it's not necessarily that you need a big coop, it's that you need a lot of little coops. Like you need different areas, because the way that it pans out is they need to be broken up. This hen can't be with this one. These roosters need to be split up. This breed needs to go with this one. So it's a lot of trial by error and a lot of like, I'll buy products, I'll buy a feeder, and then realize this doesn't work. It sucks. I know my first winter I bought like, I'm gonna say like $700 worth of heated water bowls, and not a single one of them worked the following year. So like I said, for myself, it's a lot of trial and error. And I just try and share as much of that along the way. Me and my friend, we started a blog. So I'm hoping to get a lot of like product reviews and stuff like that on there, because I've tried a lot of different items. Now, instead of buying, you know, 20 of the same item like I did the first time, I'll buy one and like trial it, see how it goes before I decide if I'm going to like go that route, or I'll buy like a couple different ones and then see which one works better for myself. Because I find like even with my birds, for example, like even for waters, so I did heated water bowls. Well, it doesn't work for Polish because they dunk their whole heads and then they turn into icicles. So then I bought waters with like the nipples on them. Well, those are great, but my silkies couldn't figure out how to drink out of them. So it's kind of like, you know what I mean? Like you don't know until you get it and you're in it. So a lot of, like I said, the profits that I do make selling chicks and stuff like that, it mostly gets, like all of it pretty much gets invested back into the chickens themselves, improving their quality of housing, improving efficiency for where they live. And then hopefully, if there's anything extra, would like to start working towards like getting other animals and like setting up for them. But yeah, so much trial and error.
Well, that points out something, that really having real knowledge of something is experiential, right? It's not reading it in a book or listening to someone else talk about it. I mean, that certainly helps, because you going out and say making the mistakes you've made and posting that on your page. Now, if I wanted to get into making or get into having chickens, say, I'm going to say, oh, okay, let's see, where did this go wrong? Where did that go wrong? And then I don't do that. And then I start doing my own thing. But then it's like, you know, I'm going to find, you know, because if we have them in our backyard, you know, our situation is going to be totally different than your situation. So there's going to be different things that won't work just because of, you know, where we are and what we're doing.
Yeah.
And then there was another thing I was going to say and I forgot.
I was just kind of curious about the nutrition for the chickens. What kind of stuff do they eat?
So important part with chickens, so you can get the feed for them at the store, and it has all the nutrients that they need in it. So typically it goes in like life stages. So chicks get chick feed, and then usually I move them over to grower feed. If you do meat birds, they stay on grower. It's got a higher protein and it kind of like fattens them up, but for developing birds, it helps with their growth. And then once they become around laying age, they go on to a layer pellet. It has more calcium in it and the nutrients that they need in order to produce eggs, because that takes a lot away from their body. And then other than just like the feed that they get, a lot of like most of my birds free range, so they eat a lot of bugs, so high protein. But you can also, if you don't free range, you can buy a lot of this stuff online, even Amazon. You can buy mealworms, soldier fly larvae, stuff like that. People do their own mealworm farms, which I really, really want to get into, but I'm trying not to add extra projects at this current moment, but I'd love to produce my own for them. So a lot of greens, free ranging grass, stuff like that. And then also I feed them a lot of stuff from my garden. So a lot of produce, but the only thing with that is that you're not supposed to offer treats in excess of 10% of their diet. So a lot of people might not know that and offer maybe more food thinking that it's higher value for them or they like it, but it throws off the nutrients that they need and the vitamins that they do need to sustain themselves. And then you can run into issues like vitamin deficiencies, where the birds are seemingly like they look drunk or they're having balance issues and stuff, and that's from vitamins being off. And again, certain breeds are a lot more prone to that, like silkies. They very easily get vitamin deficiency. So for my birds, like I said, they get their pellets, and you can ferment it also, where you soak the pellets in water for a couple of days so it ferments, and you actually get more out of your food because it expands and they eat less of it. And apparently it's really good for their gut health. So they get that, and then they do get some stuff from the garden. So they love like pumpkins, squash. They don't really like lettuce, surprisingly, even though they eat grass, but pumpkin, squash, they love watermelon. I find if I ever see stuff on sale, like I went to the store and cantaloupes were on sale and I bought like 20 cantaloupes, and they probably thought I was insane. But anything like that, they'll get as a treat, and then supplementing with insects, but they'll eat anything. Anything they find, like mice, snakes outside, like they will eat anything. They will eat meat. They will literally eat anything. And then other than that, I do have, like in the wintertime, I have electrolytes that I put in their water just to make sure that they're staying hydrated. Because in the winter, they surprisingly consume a lot of water, and they need to be well hydrated in order to like regulate their body temperature so that they don't freeze. So I do supplement with electrolytes. And in the summer, if it's really hot, electrolytes as well, or like ice with food in it so that they kind of like pick at that. And then I have like vitamin supplements that I put in as well in their water.
Yeah, that's yeah, I would see that too. Like I would see like say pictures where people would be throwing like your scraps from say like salad scraps or something like that kind of thing in there. And I would think exactly the same thing too. I would think, oh yeah, of course that'd be great for them. And if they're pecking away at it, I would think, oh right, they're happy. And then you don't think, you know, if they're eating too much of that one thing they like, basically getting the equivalent of say chicken junk food, and now they're not getting their chicken veggies, even though they're eating their veggies, I guess.
Yeah, and there's other things like you can buy scratch at the store. That's just like seeds and stuff, or sunflower seeds you can buy. Where I know like a lot of people will feed a lot of that because I mean birds eat seeds, but it doesn't have the vitamins that the layer foods have in it. And then I know with like the sunflower seeds, like those black seeds, if they eat a ton of those, it can actually cause like other issues like liver issues and stuff like that. So I would say for anyone watching, definitely give your birds treats. They'll love you, but not too many.
Yeah, well, I mean that seems like a thing that kind of bears out logic wise. Like, you know, you wouldn't give your kids just treats all the time either, right? You make sure they eat the stuff that they should be eating to make sure they're healthy, and then you give them a treat every now and again, you know. So there's another thing I noticed on your page there. You have what's called Northern Farm Hers. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. So that is a new company and project that I'm doing with my friend Kayla, who is also a chicken lady just like me. She has a lot more animals than I do too, so she's a hobby farm. So basically what we did is we decided to create Northern Farmers, and basically it is a community for female farmers, homesteaders, basically women in agriculture, homesteading in any way. So it's a community for them based on kind of knowledge sharing. So for example, this month, we're doing all about horses because it's my birthday and that's what I chose. But anyways, so this whole month, what we've been doing is we have different people from all over Canada. So this is specific to Canada too, which is great because it lets Canadians interact together. And the reason we wanted to do that as well is because a lot of people I follow or started following on Instagram and Facebook and stuff when I started, they were all in the States. And like I'm following someone in the States for gardening, and I'm like, okay, but it's like there's snow here till June. Like it's not, it doesn't apply a lot of the stuff. So it's really nice to follow other Canadians and see what's going on in similar climates. And also, like I said, when it comes to animals, how it's restricted, medication, vets. So they have unique experience, because if I'm telling someone in the States my chicken problems, they're like, well, just go to the store. You know what I mean? They don't understand the barrier, where us in Canada, like I can tell you there's been nights 10:30 at night, I'm driving down a dark road to meet another chicken lady to like exchange money for medication. You know what I mean? It's a completely different world. So this group has been really great. This month we're doing courses, like I said. So basically every day, every couple of days, we have someone taking over the page, where they get to log in, completely take it over, post to stories, post to feed, and they get to share their life and what they're doing in terms of courses this month. And then I think next month we're going to be moving on to something different. It looks like it's going to be gardening tips, which is great because I'm not a great gardener. So, and then same thing, it's going to be just using the power of the community and finding people who are experts in their field. Like I would say I'm great at chickens, but don't know, I wouldn't claim to be an expert in anything else. Not that I'm a chicken expert, but there are people everywhere that are really great at what they do. So the page and the community is kind of about learning from those people so we can share with one another. So next month, gardening. So hopefully we can get some good gardeners across Canada that can share what they do and give us some tips and tricks. And then also, aside from the Instagram platform, where we kind of operate primarily, there's also a Facebook community group, which is good because on Facebook you can kind of comment back and forth and have those conversations, where Instagram not so much. So that's pretty much about the page and about the group.
So that's a great idea. I like the idea of having a space where people who've got a lot of stuff in common and common interests can get together, and you can have sort of a created community where people feel like they can share their know-how and share their competencies and sort of help build up each other with that kind of thing. And I wonder sometimes too, like, well, I mean, this is a relatively new technology, all of this Instagram and all that other kind of stuff. And I think it's one of those tools that at first we didn't really understand what it was or how to use it. And so we've been using a hammer to go around and smash a bunch of stuff instead of like building a house. And now we're starting to figure out, oh, hey, you know, if we use this in a directed way, we can actually build something that will last a long time. And so making those connections with the farm herds and getting awareness towards what they're doing so that they can get it out to other people who need access to their information. And like you said, having access to information that's Canada specific, because that's one thing I've been learning over the last couple of years is me for sure. I focus on or pay way too much attention to our southern neighbors. And it's easy to get caught up in it maybe, but I started looking in more to stuff that was more Canada centric and started realizing that although we may be sort of culturally similar in some ways, and that might be because of the influence we get from media, we're actually very, very different. And the way that we do things is very, very different. Like, I mean, you think about the sort of just the structure of our government, you think, oh, we're both democracies. And it's like, not even the same thing in any way at all. I mean, it's all of it is all, you know, that's one thing that I think I hope to get out of doing stuff like this is that we're getting Canadians talking to Canadians and say Sudburians talking to Sudburians or the surrounding areas. Because I mean, I think what ends up being too is we contact more small communities that are sort of outskirt or sort of satellite to Sudbury anyways. But anyways, creating the communication between these smaller communities because we are so spread out, but the information we can get across, and that's really the important thing. And then we can help grow out these real community foundational blocks. Because I think what you're doing and what a lot of these other people we're talking to are doing is they're actually building the foundation blocks to having a thriving, strong community. we think having a community is having a bunch of stores you can go to. It's like, well, these big stores that aren't owned by people who live here, they're not taking value and putting it into our community. They're extracting value from our community. And what I think I like to see more of is having people who are in our community who are becoming extremely competent in whatever field it is, whether it be dealing with chickens or other birds, or it be farming and providing food. Because I look at that as being a plus on so many levels. I mean, we're investing in the community. Every dollar earned in the community circulates in the community. So everyone gets to touch that dollar basically before it eventually has to leave. And we're also building community in the sense that we're rehumanizing all of our social interactions and our business interactions, where especially over the last couple of years, we've digitized them and we've dehumanized them. And we sort of maybe fooled ourselves into thinking it was a superficial change. And really, I think the last couple of years of having to be forcefully isolated from all kinds of other people and having this be one of the few exchanges that you can actually connect with, it really highlighted to me, at least, that what we need to do is have real out in the world communities that are strong and centered around shared values and building each other up and strengthening each other. Because I think that's a big part of this community too, is everyone wants everyone else to thrive. Like, we want to build up everyone in this space. And I think everyone else who's in the space wants the same for everybody else in the space. And I think that's one of those core ideas that as a community, we can kind of huddle around, sort of like a little fire in a way, and keep alive this little idea of making each other stronger, making each other better.
Yeah, 100%. And I find like with the community that we built here with the Northern Farm Herds, and not to exclude you, but another reason for it is that we found, like, as women, there's a lot of unique challenges that we face trying to manage all the hats that come on top of it. So it's kind of a place as well to discuss not only knowledge share, but like have somewhere to lean to, have friends to lean on when you need help and support, that understand kind of what it is like to be in that role. I know for myself as well, like I mentioned to you guys, there's been times where I'm just like, I don't know why I do this. Like, I just am like at my wit's end. And Kayla's actually in my community. She lives a couple streets down, and having her as a friend to kind of like talk me out of it and understand where I'm coming from, because she's also in the farming community and she's also like a mother and a wife and all those things. So having someone truly understand what I'm going through and kind of talk me down off the edge and like bring me back down to earth and like has been a godsend. So I'm hoping in this community we can help make those connections for other people too, where if someone within our community is struggling and they need help with something, or they're just having a hard time coping with like managing the farm plus like doing all the things that it's required, that this can kind of be a safe space for that as well, where they can kind of like confide and find help from other people. Because I think like going through this alone, like obviously I'm married and I have my husband and I love him to death, but like having like a friend or another woman to kind of like pick me up or help me out or know what I'm going through has been really helpful, because there was maybe times before my friendship with Kayla where things just really sucked and I wanted to give up so badly. So, I mean, like having her around and her help has been great. Like, I'm truly grateful. So I'm hoping we can help other people too. And yeah, so it's not just about farming. There's a lot of other stuff too within the group. So farming, homeschooling, how to manage, you know, like the chores and manage kids and manage expectations that are put on us as women. Where, no offense, but there's a lot of, you know, expectation to do it all and do it perfectly almost. You know what I mean? Where it's like, you know, you need to be the perfect mom and be the perfect, like keep the perfect house and do all these things perfect. But at the end of the day, that's unrealistic for anyone. So to kind of have that like drilled on you and always trying to strive to be like, have it all together with a little bow it can be very, very draining. So it's really nice just being able to talk to other people and realize like, okay, we all kind of feel this way. Like, what are we doing about it? What can we do? How can we manage it? So that's another big part of the group, and it's been going really well so far. I'm really proud of it. So.
And that's excellent. And that's actually a point that I would certainly agree with, is like the more shared experience you have, the more relatability you're going to have, and the more ability you're going to have for an accurate reflection. And in having an accurate reflection, you'll be able to come to those realizations, like you mentioned, is it really realistic to put this kind of pressure on myself to do this and to do that, to wear myself out to my wit's end? And of course, that's going to be very specific. Like you said, being, say, a mother and a wife and a person who's running a business and all of these things on top of that, it's not something everyone's doing or everyone's experiencing. And so if someone has more in common with you, it's obvious that they're going to be able to provide better support, because they know maybe a little more than the average person would in what way you need more support, say. And I think that's great. I think any group that gets together for any reason, like any commonality, I mean, and are going into the world trying to do something good and make a positive, I think that's great. Like I know, for example, like they got like men's groups, like say you'll have your Freemasons or whatever. And some people will think, well, why would you want to have that? It's like, well, it's a space where guys can go together and kind of be guys and do their thing. And it's a lot of support there. And then, you're talking about each other like your brothers and all that kind of thing. And then in your Farm Hers group, it's the same thing. You got your sisters in there and you're working together, and you're talking about what it means to, say, be a farmer in your eyes, or a breeder or a mother or a wife or whatever. And I think that's a beautiful thing. I think every community needs that sort of little center that they can cohere around. There has to be that thing. And I think it doesn't really matter what that thing is, as long as you go forward trying to do a good thing and you go forward like with love and understanding a little bit. I think it works out for the best. I mean, that sounds a little cliche and corny, but I mean, I don't know, maybe sometimes we live in a world that's actually just, what's the word I'm looking for? Not nihilist, I guess nihilistic, but the word I'm looking for is more like cynical. Like, it's childish to have these sort of ideas. And I kind of look at that and think how sad that is, because, why not be a kid full of wonder who's doing beautiful things and imagining and making friends and connections? I mean, I don't know. That sounds like a good thing to me.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely agree. And like I said, I'm very proud of the space and what me and Kayla have been able to do with it so far. And I hope we can kind of continue to find different ways and creative ways of connecting people throughout Canada. Like you were saying earlier, I feel like for myself, it was always looking at people in the States and thinking like, oh, wow, look at their garden and look at how beautiful this is. And, but you're comparing apples to oranges, where it's like, it's always summer there. So it's not realistic. And the challenges are a lot different. So it's a really nice to have the kind of space and community. I hope that we can continue to grow it. I think we're about just over 800 followers now, since I believe we started at the end of February at some time. So I'm hoping we can continue to grow it and reach as many other people as we can. And I can say I've definitely learned a lot, even from just the short time that we've been operating the community. Another great thing that we're doing is we try and do a Farm Her feature, where we pick someone specifically and we do like a feature, like a write-up about them and what they do and what products they sell. And I think that part of it's really great too, because like you were saying, there's all these box stores, but really what are they contributing? Like, what do they care about our community? So it's really nice to see what other people are selling and what they're doing. And then maybe when I'm going to buy a gift, instead of going to Walmart and getting this, well, I know this fellow Canadian that sells this, in their Etsy shop or something, and then I can source from them and support them instead. So it's been really cool in that aspect too, and just getting to know so many people and seeing what they're doing. And it's honestly awesome. Lots of really smart people with a lot of knowledge that I'm very thankful that I've come across, because I may have never found their page or spoken to them, or so it's honestly great.
Yeah, and what's great about that is it's all Canadians, and it's all people who you can relate to, who are out there doing something that they never knew before. Like everyone's kind of in a new space. They're creating something new. It's similar to say what's in the States, but it's not the same thing as in the States. It's our own little thing. And so, you know, I think that's a thing that we should really admire. And I like that idea of, you know, if I'm going to get a gift for someone, you know, I'm going to go and buy it from someone else in Canada, say, because part of it, we got to kind of think, if we want Canada as a country to thrive, say, or Ontario as a province to thrive, we got to invest in our community. And that means working in our community. And, you know, maybe you're putting money into the community, but it's also doing the work like you're doing and like your friends doing there with your Northern Farmers group, and with doing what you're doing on your page and what all these other people are doing. I think that's exactly what we got to be doing. And so thank you for doing what you're doing, and thank you for coming and talking to us. So for anyone who listens to this, could you let them know where they could contact you or get your service?
Yeah, so I am available all over social media, but you can reach me on my page, Red Rowan Acres, on Facebook, Instagram, or even by email, redrowanacres@gmail.com. And if you're interested in looking at some breeds, you can also visit our website, which is redrowanacres.ca.
Perfect.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Nice talking to you guys.
Yeah, no problem. It was nice to meet you.
Yeah, you as well. Bye.